Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana episode. In this video, I'm stamping a punny, clean and simple card featuring the Simons STM Yarn Love stamp set. All supplies I'm using in this video are listed and linked in the video description below. Now here's a look at the Yarn Love set, and if you don't have it yet, run and grab it. It is one of those punny sets to create quirky and funny cards for your crafty friends who aren't necessarily into card making, but perhaps into knitting or crochet. I absolutely love the wordplay here. Now this is a larger stamp set featuring several images of yarn, knitting needles, measuring tape, and a bunch of clever sentiments like, "Oh, knit, I forgot your birthday." There are also coordinating dies available, and this die set is huge as there is a die not only for every image, but also for sentiments. And you'll see me use one of the sentiment dies later on in this video. Now, even though these are outline images, I wanted to do a card without any coloring to show you an alternative way of using outline images, stamping them in black ink, and still having pops of color on your card. So I have a simple 2x2 grid layout in my head, and I want to stamp 4 images of yarn, so 2x2, and highlight each using a different color of ink. So I picked several colors from Simons Says Stamp. These are positively saturated inks in Cantaloupe, Cheeky, Celery, and Sunbeam. Now, I needed a solid shape to do my highlighting, and I basically needed something to be able to add a blob of color under my stamped shapes, under my stamped yarn. So I looked through my stash and I found an older stamp set from Simon, yet still one of my favorites, the Organic Fruit. So this set has several solid shape options, and I picked one that looked most like a circle. Now, if you don't have this set, you can look through your stash to find something similar. You basically need an organic looking shape to stamp blobs of color onto your background. Or you can also use a circle shape or, something similar. If you absolutely have nothing like that in your stash, you can use fun foam, cut out a shape from it, and use the fun foam to do the stamping, because you can always stamp with fun foam. It's an old technique, but it still works. Anyhow, I used a clear block to do my stamping. I inked up the blob and stamped it using the 4 different colors of ink onto the Simons Says Stamp 130-pound cardstock. I love to use this paper for all of my stamping. There's also the 120-pound version, which is just as good. It is just a little bit thinner, but still pretty thick and absolutely perfect for stamping. Now, this paper takes ink really well, and I find I don't even need to do any double stamping here. It really works like magic. Now, this particular ink does even out over time, so if you stamp a shape and it doesn't look perfect right away, give it time, give it a couple of minutes, and it will even out. Now, I made sure to overlap my shapes slightly, not too much, but they are touching and thus look connected, and they create a nice, colorful background. Next, I did use my Misty to stamp the yarn and the sentiments, and I first placed the long sentiment under my colorful stamping, and the sentiment reads, "Money cannot buy happiness, but it can buy yarn," which is kinda the same thing, and I love it. I have a friend who likes to crochet, so this card is going to be perfect for her. Now, I also positioned the 4 yarn images over the colorful blobs. Now, I did make sure that each of my yarn shapes went outside the boundaries of the colorful blob, and I also angled my shapes, so each is facing a different direction. Now, I used the VersaFine Onyx Black ink to do my stamping. So I stamped the images and the sentiment. Now, this particular ink is pigment, and it does take a little longer to dry, especially on this paper, because this paper is kind of, I don't want to say glossy, but it has a very nice and smooth finish. So it takes a little bit longer to dry on this paper. So be careful so that you don't smudge this black ink. What you can do is you can also heat set it using your heat tool, or heat emboss your black stamping with clear embossing ink. That will set it, and you won't have to worry about smudging. Stamping images over the colorful blobs added really cool pops of color without me having to actually color anything. So it is a very simple but very effective way to add color to your cards. Now, I also heat embossed an additional sentiment. I used white detail embossing powder and embossed the sentiment on black cardstock, and I cut it out using a coordinating die. I love the shape that this sentiment gives, and of course, the sentiment itself is super clever and funny. It reads, "My doctor recommended more fiber, so let's buy more yarn." Isn't that clever? I just love it. Anyhow, next I used a layer of white fun foam and I foam mounted my stamped panel onto an A2 side folding card base. Now I forgot to mention that I trimmed my panel using a rectangle die. I needed to make my panel a little bit smaller than my card base, and popping it up over the card base added visual interest and sort of helped frame my design. I also foam mounted my white heat embossed sentiment. I moved it slightly to the right hand side of my panel, and I used thin foam adhesive squares here instead of the regular thickness. So the sentiment is popped up a little bit, but it's not too high up on my card. Lastly, I added a couple of sequins. These are the Aura sequins from Spellbinders. I really like them because they don't have the opening in the center. So they're like the flat discs, but they're not exactly flat. They do have that cupped sequin look to them. And here I use the new Simon Says Stamp embellishment wand to pick up and position my sequins. And I adhere them to my card using the Barely Arts glue. You guys know me. This is my go-to glue for pretty much any crafting. So that's a look at the finished card. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you like this idea, and I hope you will try to add color to your next stamped project using a solid shape. If you make a card inspired by this video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.